Yeah, absolutely. So here's the ETH chart. And one of the things you can see this little kind of like 45-degree angle I put in the yesterday. And what I was doing is I was teaching how when you have a move up like this, what they consider to be a bull flag or in spirit of bull flag, it's either a right angle or down to about a 45-degree angle. So yesterday I was showing people how even with the little sell off yesterday, it was still within that 45-degree angle, which made it more bullish. And you could see today price making a move up. Now it's testing this high. Can ETH break out? If it breaks out, you could have a little bit of short-term upside here in Ethereum. So it's not a bad chart. It still has a bullish pattern and it's starting to react. We'll have to see if it's able to break out. But you're right. I mean, ETH is definitely one to keep an eye on. If Bitcoin does go to 9,000, eventually ETH will break down and probably take out this low here. But same thing, I'll be an accumulator once that happens in the charts. But the other thing to look at here is you have this long-term trend line, right? So if you're someone who's looking for maybe the next bull market to start in ETH, you would want to see this long-term trend line going back to the highs, the all-time highs. You want to see price start trading and holding above there. And then that would be a very nice signal to tell you that that downward trend line has broken. So here's the BSV US dollar chart. And you're right. I mean, that pop, you know, I just looked at it today. What a pop yesterday. A couple things interesting on that. Number one is it does bring up an intriguing point that if the government does regulate, I mean, here in this case, it was an exchange or I'm not sure exactly what you said, but it was they started to limit the leverage, right? And so shorts had to cover. And essentially the concept there that it made me jump to is that if we do get regulation, what if the regulation says exchanges can only offer 2-to-1 margin, right? Or double your margin? Could there potentially be short covering that is forced that way? And maybe that's another, I mean, you see what happened here on BSV, what a move up. Interestingly enough on the chart, look at where BSV stopped, right? And you know, I love doing this chart. Pivot high, major pop, and it stopped on a dime right there and then pulled back. So I think that's very cool to see. And again, like you were saying earlier, is that, you know, BSV underperformed when Bitcoin was going nuts, but now it's actually overperformed. And if we look at that Bitcoin BSV and we compare those charts, you can clearly see, so it was an underperformed, Bitcoin's above, and then you flipped down here, and it's now Bitcoin's been an underperformer while this has started to uptick a little bit. And I think that's fascinating because, you know, it makes you wonder is do you have a safer crypto even than Bitcoin here? I mean, again, I might be jumping to conclusions, but it's kind of an intriguing aspect because it's like, you know, think about it. In a bull market, gold usually underperforms, but in a bear market, it overperforms. So is your BSV your gold standard for Bitcoin? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. So I definitely pay attention to other pairs, right? But in terms of the DXY itself, what's fascinating about this, and I'll just show you guys a couple trend lines here, is so when you were up here, there was so much bullish bias. I mean, everyone was just screaming that the dollar was the big thing. But look at what you had here. All right. So what you can see here and why I love drawing trend lines is that here you started it, and at that high, look at the pullback. Then you hit it here, look at the pullback, and then here and look at the pullback. So what you can gather is that, again, sometimes you have to, as an investor, ignore the kind of the buzz and the kind of the yelling of people saying something. It's very easy for us to get caught up in that hysteria. But in reality, the charts are like the purest form of honesty. And here you very clearly saw that, all right, well, we should have some sort of pullback in the dollar. It did there, and it actually turned out to be a bigger drop. Interestingly enough, you can see very clearly here's a trend line, and you can see why the dollar is catching a little bit of a bid off of this line. Now, going to the pairs trade, like GB, the British pound, right? So GBP USD, let me just bring up that one here. Interestingly enough, look at this. So I had these trend lines. I was doing a private consulting over the weekend, and we talked about this. And you could see how this line here, look at how it goes right through these lows. And then look at the bounce on the pound right there, and then look at the pullback starting. So again, you know, it's awesome. I mean, this is what I live for, is this kind of stuff. And the same thing here. You could see the panic. I remember when the pound was collapsing. This is right around when the new prime minister was getting in there and all that. And panic is usually a buying opportunity, right? When you see that fear reach a maximum. And by the way, it's one of the reasons why I don't think Bitcoin's quite bottomed yet, is we haven't fully seen that panic washout that we usually see in bear markets.
Sure.
So I think if you did pierce 10,000 on Bitcoin, I think there's a lot of people that would panic a little bit if, we start breaking 10K. And I think that could be an interesting thing. So that's kind of an interesting chart. And then like the Euro, US dollar here, you could see how, again, you basically bottomed just below $1. And then you had this interesting trend line where you kept on hammering. And every time you hit it, you pulled back until finally it broke out. Sure. And that's the trigger for what you start to watch for. Now, on a technical basis, I'm gonna show you guys how I trade this. Like, I'm never someone that once it breaks out, I don't chase the buy. That to me is like a cardinal sin of trading where, it's already rallied up. Like if you look 1, 2, 3, and then up here. So I'm paying up too much at that point. So what I do is I look for the retrace to what I call the scene of the crime. And the scene of the crime very clearly is this level right here. So notice how this was the line where it couldn't get through, and it finally got through. And then where does it go? Right back to that line. That's where you want to buy right here. And then ultimately look at the price action there. So, I mean, that's just some tidbits on technical analysis that I love that I use. It's called the confirmation signal. And basically the confirmation signal is so what ends up happening in trading is that there's a lot of algos that know these levels and they tend to push price below to try to scare people out or above to try to stop them out as well. And so what I look for is I look for 2 consecutive higher closes, right? So here you closed above the line. Even there, I wouldn't trust the breakout because it's just there's too many games where they're trying to lure people in. But once you get a second close higher than that first candle, it's very hard for the algos to force the market to really reverse quickly. And so what I do is when we're retracing back, I say, okay, so same thing now. If they close it below, they could be just trying to whip out the weak hands. Let's see if it confirms. And in this case, it just had one close below and then ripped back up. So it never confirmed. And so the little tidbits like that kind of keep you in the trade. But you're right. I mean, it's scary when they bring it back in like that. Yeah, so I'm in that camp that in the short term, this is significant resistance. One of the reasons why it's significant is because you have multiple trend lines. So anytime you have, you have one trend line that is flat. And then if I go to my weekly chart, you can see this longer term trend line from here to here, and it goes right to there. And so anytime you have 2 technical trend lines kind of converging, there's going to be major resistance there. And in all fairness, if you look at the run that the pounds had, it went from $1.03 to basically $1.21. Percentage wise, that's a big move in the near term. It should pull back.
Overbought.
So for me, basically what I would say is, it may be in the beginnings of a new bullish move, but you got to let it pull back. For me, it would probably be a pullback to like this trend line here. You connect these lows, maybe this one here could be an opportunity, but somewhere in this vicinity is where we should see the pound pull back to. Looking at the overall market, we're in this period where the Fed now looks like they might be starting to kind of not go as crazy with 75 basis points. I think on December 14th, we have the next Fed decision. And so I think right now the markets are kind of getting giddy. They're like, oh, yay, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think what we need to realize is that they're still going to be hiking and they're definitely not going to be cutting rates. And so you have an economy that is strong right now. Like we saw incredible consumer spending over the Black Friday holiday and so forth. But there will be a point where all these rate hikes really filter into the economy. And so I think people should just be very careful, especially with stocks and the stock market. And I do think that we'll see a recession in 2023. So be careful out there. I think the beautiful thing about Bitcoin and crypto is that we will see the low probably in the first half of 2023. And I actually think that you'll get to a point where crypto starts, at least Bitcoin and maybe some of the others, it starts going up when the stock market goes down. We haven't seen that really. It's usually down together, up together. But I do think you'll see a flip in that kind of thesis there in 2023.